Hi. Almost everyone watches me without a subscription. Please support my channel with a subscription. I try for you. Thank you.
Story 1. OOP tells his dad he is a virgin. His dad hires an escort for him. A few days ago, I decided to visit my dad at his house. It was his birthday. I showed up with wine. We got a little drunk. Maybe more than a little. When my dad was done going on and on about how much he missed my mom since she divorced him, he changed the subject and focused on my love life. He asked if I had a GF and I said no. Then he asked if I've ever had a GF because he's never seen me with a girl. I said never. My dad poured the last drop of wine in my glass and asked if I was still a virgin. I was tempted to lie, but I paused too long, so I said yes. My dad said I had no reason to feel ashamed about my virginity, but encouraged me to have as much sex as possible before I end up married to a person whose vagina comes with an impenetrable encryption. I ignored the obvious reference to my mom's you-know-what and called it a night. I asked my dad if I was allowed to sleep in the spare bedroom because I didn't want to drive home drunk. My dad said I was more than welcome. I must have been sleeping for less than an hour before I woke up to the sound of my dad knocking on the door. I don't remember what I mumbled as I opened my eyes, but the moment my dad heard my voice, he entered my room with another person. It was a girl. My dad introduced her by name, but did the air quotes thing with his fingers to imply that it was a fake name. I could tell my dad was still drunk. Exhibit A, he continued making the air quote gesture, even when it was no longer necessary. Not gonna lie, I was still drunk too, but not drunk enough to disregard the weird fucking shit that was happening. Without giving me proper time to react, my dad quickly said the girl knew exactly what to do before closing the door on his way out. The girl did not know what to do. She did nothing other than awkwardly waiting for me to say something. I eventually asked her what was going on, and she said my dad hired her to sleep with me. I died of embarrassment, especially when the girl asked me to explain if I was on the zero experience or the some experience end of the virgin spectrum. Without thinking, I said I was gay. It was the first time I actually said it out loud. The girl sat down on the bed and asked if I was a top or a bottom. I shrugged and said I didn't know yet. My face must have been so red at that moment. The girl said if I was willing to go shower, then she would basically be willing to motorboat my butt. To be honest, I considered it. I'm human. I'm horny. However, the situation was way too weird for me to be completely comfortable doing something that's sexual with someone I didn't know at all. I said thank you, but no thank you to the girl and apologized for my dad putting both of us in an awkward position. She said she understood and for some reason thought it was necessary to mention that my dad was one of their regular customers. She made it clear for the record that she never had sex with my dad, but explained that some of her older coworkers at the escort service really enjoyed spending time with him. She said she can't wait to tell the other sex workers that she met me because apparently my dad loves to talk about his son with the people he pays to fuck. I was not psychologically prepared for the unexpected discussion regarding my dad's sex life. The girl had a severe case of motor mouth. When she finally stopped talking, I learned that my dad sleeps with sex workers who kind of look like my mom and that women closing their eyes with too much food in their mouth and saying turns him on. The girl apologized for abusing my good listening skills and asked if there was nothing she could do for me. I said she could keep my sexuality between the two of us. She said her lips were sealed until the time comes to suck cock. My dad was passed out in the living room when we approached the front door. I went back to bed when the girl was gone and eventually fell asleep. The following morning, I confronted my dad. I said I didn't appreciate what he did and made sure he understood that he wasted his money because nothing happened. My dad was apologetic and promised never to cross that line again, no matter how much alcohol is involved. Despite his apology, the mood was still somewhat tense. I decided to break the tension by closing my eyes and saying while eating breakfast. The look on my dad's face was priceless. I lost my appetite soon afterwards because I instantly regretted doing something that might arouse my father. TLDR told my dad I was still a virgin, and his response was to blindside me in the middle of the night with a sex worker who realized I was not into girls and ended up telling me more than I wanted to know about my dad's history with other sex workers. The inevitable happened. The sex worker my dad hired to terminate my virginity in the dead of night did not keep her mouth shut. I know. I should have seen it coming. When I shared my original post, I was convinced my dad didn't know I was gay. I never said anything to anyone about my sexuality other than to the sex worker who teamed up with my father to unexpectedly put me in a vulnerable position. My dad and I have been avoiding each other since that night. Not gonna lie, I was okay with that. We needed space. The words divorced dad, virgin son, and sex worker should never be said in the same sentence. This morning my dad showed up at my apartment. Unusual but not surprising. He was courteous enough to call beforehand. Asked if I was available. Said he wanted to talk. I assumed he was still feeling bad about ambushing me with a sex worker and wanted to make sure that our relationship was intact. Little did I know that my dad's primary objective was to establish if his 20-year-old son was sexually attracted to other people's 20-year-old sons. As soon as my dad made himself at home in my living room, he asked if we were alone. I said my roommate was at the gym. My dad's response was to drop the following line: sharing an apartment with a guy who works out must be motivating. Slow clap. Subtle as fuck, my father. He didn't even need to wink at the camera. My dad asked if my roommate had a GF. I implied that he had girls that come and go. My dad said my roommate must be handsome to get so much attention. I shrugged and said, or he's paying for it. It was a joke. An uncomfortable joke based on my dad's disturbed expression. My dad said he could explain the sex workers and answer all my questions if was prepared to listen. I said it was none of my business and he didn't owe me an explanation, but I did suggest that he at least consider therapy. My dad said he was proud of the person I've become and promised to think about my suggestion. As wholesome as that moment was, the gay elephant was still in the room, so I awkwardly asked my dad if he recently communicated with the sex worker he hired to sleep with me. My dad said no because he wanted to respect my privacy and avoid crossing the line again. Based on all the random references to my roommate's attractiveness, I was convinced my dad heard I was gay from one of the other sex workers, who heard it from the sex worker with the motor mouth. We danced around the topic of my sexuality for a little longer because it was still a big moment despite all the weird shit that happened the last time my dad and I were under the same roof. I eventually came out and said it. Dad, I'm gay. My dad stood up and showed me he was wearing socks with rainbow stripes to celebrate the news. I didn't even notice his socks until he lifed the leg opening of his pants. He said it was a gift from the sex workers. He had another pair of rainbow socks in his pocket, which he gave to me when we were done hugging. I suppose the outcome could have been worse. I doubt there will be another update, so thank you for riding this wave with me. TLDR an update post, not really a fuck up. I informed a sex worker with a motor mouth that I was gay and expected her to keep that information private. She spread the news amongst her fellow sex workers who eventually shared it with one of their loyal clients, which happened to be my dad. Story 2. OOP's husband thinks she babbittraped him. My husband, M35, and I, F32, have been married for 7 years. He lived next door and we just clicked. It was like a fairy tale. One thing I have always thought made our marriage so strong was our friendship with each other and our trust in one another, although now my husband seems to think otherwise. Recently, my husband found out that his friend, Jeff, M34, has been baby-trapped. Basically, Jeff's wife, F32, stopped taking the pill and fell pregnant a few months into their relationship and only came clean after the wedding. Jeff came from a very conservative family, which his wife knew, and so he felt obligated to marry her after the pregnancy. Unfortunately, he also now feels obligated to stay regardless of the clearly messed up dynamic because he feels that he has made a vow and will stick by his wife and child. My husband, for some reason, has been really rattled by this. I am currently 4 months pregnant with our first, and my husband asked me yesterday if I was trying to baby trap him. I first laughed because I honestly thought it was a joke. He was dead serious and doubled down, so I told him that we have already been married for 7 years and a baby was not going to trap him any more than he already is. My husband did not like that answer and said that there was no time limit on baby trapping and that my intentions were clearly not pure given how I was acting as if his concerns were a joke. He said he had trusted me in the past, but me laughing in his face gave him no reason to trust me now. I did not really know what he wanted or how I was meant to respond, and I said we should talk about this in the morning. Today, I woke up and my husband was gone, but I did have a nasty text from his brother, M28, saying that I had forced my husband into this pregnancy despite it having been a joint decision. My husband is MIA and not responding to calls or texts, and now I am wondering how on earth to go forward. Any advice is appreciated. Update: not sure if I am allowed to post in here again, but I wanted to quickly update everyone who was kind enough to give me some advice. I didn't respond to anyone because my post was locked quite quickly, but I have read every single comment and message. I am very grateful. I realized while I was reading the comments that everyone was right. I wasn't angry enough. My husband had insulted me and our marriage in a very hurtful way, and it just didn't really register for a while. I was so confused and upset that it didn't occur to me to be angry, but I think everything just needed to sink in. In the meantime, I called my best friend, F31, who has been such a rock in my life. She came over with some chocolate and was furious when she heard. She called her husband, M34, to the house after I had gotten everything out of my system. He is a family lawyer, and he said that he would happily represent me if I wanted to go through with a divorce. This man is a saint and will draw up divorce papers on Monday. My MIL, F66, showed up with my husband in the car not long after my best friend's husband arrived, and she practically dragged him to the door. My MIL said that he had showed up at theirs late last night saying that he was certain that I was using the baby to trap him. Fortunately, my MIL is a smart woman and absolutely tore him a new one before dragging him to the house today to apologize. My worm of a husband did not look me in the eye the entire time, but said that he was scared about becoming a dad and projected his fears onto me. He said he wasn't sure if he was ready for that kind of commitment, but he will step up, as if he is some kind of hero. I roll. I called him a coward and told him that he should stay with his parents until I am ready to talk to him. I didn't want to say anything about the divorce papers because I didn't know what his reaction would be, but he will find out soon enough. I also showed my MIL the text from my BIL, and her face was like a storm cloud. I don't know what will happen there, but I am sure it will be bad. For now, I am exhausted and just want to curl up and cry. My best friend has said she'll spend the night with me and we can watch silly movies. I have also made an appointment with a therapist for next week, but for now, I just need to rest. I am exhausted and devastated that my marriage has come crumbling down. Sorry for the sad ending, everyone. Update: thank you to everyone for all the messages and kind pieces of advice. I have received so many requests for an update, so I thought I would quickly post and let you all know how I am doing. Overall, everything has settled a little bit. In good news, I had a scan with the doctor, my MIL attended with me, and the baby is happy and healthy. I finally found out the gender. I am having a little girl. I am over the moon. My MIL was a gem and was so touched that I had included her in the scan. She is very excited to be a granny. On that note, my MIL organized a family lunch a couple of days after the scan. I was a little reluctant, but I knew that she had good intentions and wouldn't do anything to make matters worse. When I arrived, my husband and BIL were there, along with my FIL, M70, and MIL. It was quite awkward until my MIL asked if anyone had anything to say. My BIL spoke first and apologized for his awful text, saying that he was swept up in the moment and wanted to support his brother. I explained how hurtful it had been to receive such a nasty and vindictive message, and that he knew as well as anyone that my husband and I had been trying for almost a year. He hung his head and mumbled something. That was pretty much the last I heard out of him for the afternoon. Next, my MIL looked quite pointedly at my husband, but he actively avoided anyone's eyes. Eventually, she spoke up and announced that my husband would no longer be welcome to stay in their house. She said that she was ashamed to have her son behave the way that he has, and that she would prefer to make space for her granddaughter rather than have some lowlife hanging around. My husband had opened up his mouth to say something earlier, but his eyes lit up when she said granddaughter. My husband had always wanted a girl, and he was suddenly in tears saying that he was so pleased to hear the gender. My husband was suddenly wanting to touch my belly and asked if he could come home and paint the nursery. I told him in no uncertain terms that he was not welcome and that he had destroyed any trust one had in him. I told him that if I took him back, I would be worried that he would disappear at any kind of big news and that I couldn't have someone at my side who balked at the first chance. He asked me if I was telling him it was over, and I point blank told him that I had engaged a lawyer. My husband was kind of frantic, but I felt so calm, like someone had put a blanket over me in the situation. Normally I am a big crier, but I felt so removed from everything. My husband said that this was not fair. He had shown a little bit of panic, and suddenly I am throwing away our life and denying him his daughter. My FIL reminded him that this is the same baby he felt trapped by no more than 2 weeks ago. My husband said it was a mistake and he was stressed, but my MIL asked him how he thought I felt. She asked him to imagine being so vulnerable and giving up your body to grow a family, and suddenly the one person you trust is accusing you of terrible things. He said it was a mistake and he projected his fears onto me. I told my husband that I felt so broken when he left because I had all these dreams of a beautiful family which came crashing down in an instant. My husband said that he wanted those things with me and he wanted our baby girl, but that he let the panic overwhelm him. I told him that wasn't a good enough excuse for what he put me through, and that he certainly didn't seem panicked when his mom had to drag him to my door to apologize. He didn't have much of an answer other than to say that he was ready now and wanted our girl. In all of this, and all the times he told me he wanted me and our baby, he never once apologized properly. After a very, very long discussion, the lunch wrapped up and my MIL stood by what she had said about my husband not being welcome. He asked again if he could come home with me, and I told him that it was my house. I owned the house before we married, and it was going to be a safe space for me. That is to say, he is not welcome. As far as I know, he is staying at some hotel. Finally, he was served divorce papers at work on Friday. My bestie's husband drafted them earlier, but I wanted to wait until I had thought it all through. I received a few missed calls and crying voicemails asking if I was really throwing away our family, but I did not respond. He even took a crying selfie sitting in his car, which my bestie laughed at quite a bit. My MIL called me when she heard and told me that I am making the right decision. She said she never wanted my marriage to end this way or for her son to be so callous, but she said she is here for my baby and I, and that we will always be family. She even tried to apologize on my husband's behalf, but I told her that was not necessary. At the end of the day, his actions are his to own. My best friend has been around all weekend, and we went baby clothes shopping for a little bit of sunshine in all of this. She has been such a rock, and her husband has helped so much with the process. I don't know what will happen next, but I feel much calmer and like I am making the right decision.
Please subscribe, leave comments, rate videos, and click the bell not to miss my videos.